Hello, my name is Kirioth, and today we are going to talk about something that I totally forgot to mention yesterday. We talked about Chaos Knights, we talked about the Primaris Iron Father, the named Iron Hands guy, which is awesome, and we also talked about the Warcry stuff as well. All fine, all good, all cool. But it would appear that, in my excitement, I totally forgot to mention that Adeptus Mechanicus are getting their own transport by the looks of things. That's right, your boys will no longer have to walk, just like every other bloody faction in the game, just about anyway. You will finally have something to put your lads in, so they don't have to trek across the battlefield on their admittedly metal legs, through which I assume they don't feel fatigue or anything like that. But still, having an armoured transport, having any sort of transport, is quite nice, and that is exactly what you're getting by the look of things. The thing is, what the hell is that even going to look like? That's the main question for me, and it's kind of, I'm handing it off to you and just throwing some random ideas out there at the same time, because it's honestly a bit of a tricky thing to work out, I think. So, at the moment, you are very limited in your options. We can have one of them. That's a thing. The Terrax pattern termite assault drill, which looks great, but I don't know if we would necessarily see something like that from Games Workshop, especially since it already exists on Forge World. And it's mad. It's a mad transport. I like it a lot, don't get me wrong, but very much like the Sisters of Silence battle submarine, it's an interesting and different design. And it doesn't really fit the 40k look of things for AdMech at the moment. Now, there are, of course, a bunch of other tanks that the AdMech have through the Horus Heresy, technically back when it was Mechanicum, but still, looking at those things, again, they don't match the aesthetic at all. I've seen a few people who have been like, oh, well, they're tanks. They've already got tanks. They've got, like, the armoured conveyor. That's fine, but that, unfortunately, again, doesn't really match what we have in 40k. If anything, that weirdly, the older, like the Mechanicum stuff, looks slightly more modern in a way than the 40k stuff looks. The 40k stuff is really kind of weirdly baroque in a way. I think that's the best way to put it. I could be totally wrong. Might be the wrong time period entirely. But it has a certain look to it. It's totally different from anything else, especially in the Imperium side of things. They've very much got their own personality. It's very ornamental, very over the top. You've got like almost like antique-looking rifles, and I mean is it Transonic Arquebus? It just looks like something from centuries ago. From now, not necessarily something to be used in the future. Centuries being a little bit of an exaggeration, but you get what I mean. It's like historic science fiction in a weird way. That doesn't really fit what we've got now. Even one of what I would consider to be slightly more conventional in a way still doesn't really fit. I don't know if we'd have something with tracks for AdMech, because so far the design is very much leaning towards, well, just being totally different to what the rest of the Imperium has access to. It feels like there's very little crossover between what AdMech uses and what everyone else uses, and the introduction of vehicles like this, much though it would be fun to see more Horus Heresy styled things appear in 40k, especially in the form of like AdMech tanks, I don't know if they would do that, because right now AdMech have got a very, very distinctive look and feel to them, which is very, very handily displayed perfectly by the Onager Dune Crawler, which I still really like. It's still a really cool vehicle, but it is most definitely kind of weird. Let's be totally honest. It's an odd vehicle at the very least when you compare it to like all of the stuff the Space Marines use. I mean, I know there's dreadnoughts, but if you look at like rhinos and predators, like all the stuff based on the rhino chassis, basically. If you look at the Land Raider, if you look at the Repulsor, if you look at all of the stuff the Guard uses, yes, there are Sentinels, but for the most part, we're talking tracked vehicles, old-looking vehicles, stuff that is just, it's boxy, and that's about it. The Mechanicus have got such a different approach to design that just coming in with like a Mechanicum-esque tracked transport would be kind of cool in a way. It would harken back to that time, but at the same time, it would take away, I think, from the overall aesthetic, the overall kind of look that the Mechanicus has going on. And when you have things like the Dune Crawler, which are so distinctive and so different from what everyone else is fielding, I don't know if I'd want to see them move away from that. I think I'd want to see them embrace it. See, in a weird way, I think what I'd most like is for this transport to essentially adopt the same style as the rest of the Mechanicus stuff. So, talking vehicles, I mean, the Dune Crawler and the Iron Strider, having some sort of transport that is propelled on like 6 or 8 legs. Something almost Dune Crawler-esque, but kind of bulkier, longer. I mean, obviously the Dune Crawler is in no way suitable as a transport because, well, look at it. It has a cockpit and a dude sticking out the side of it. There's no way you could fit more than 2 people in there. But if you took a similar principle, if you had like 4 of those legs on either side, if it had like an elongated cabin, was lower to the ground perhaps, was wider, almost like Centipede-esque in a weird way. Now, I know it sounds weird, I know it sounds odd, but that would, to me, fit better with AdMech as a whole. When you look at the design of what they've got, something propelling itself along on like 8 legs or 10 legs or whatever, something closer to the Dune Crawler and the Iron Strider, that would work for me far better than the Mechanicum stuff. Don't get me wrong, I do love these tanks. They look great. I mean, the Karachnos is such a ridiculously cool vehicle. It just looks great. But it doesn't look like that, if you saw what I mean. I'm really hoping, like, no matter what they do with this transport, I'm hoping they don't kind of lose the overall weirdness that AdMech show. They are genuinely, in terms of design for me, one of the more interesting factions, and especially when you look at all the other stuff that the Imperium has. I mean, don't get me wrong, Space Marines are great, everyone loves Space Marines, but there are 8 bajillion varieties of Space Marine. When it comes to tanks, there are, I don't even know how many variants of like the Rhino chassis is used for this. We've got the Rhino, there's the Predator, there's the Vindicator, there's the Whirlwind, there's the anti-air one that I can't remember the name of. There's a whole shed load. Essentially, when you look at the other factions, in the Imperium especially, you've got boxes on treads or boxes on wheels. When you look at AdMech, you've got these weird, like, legged machines that kind of look old but new at the same time. They definitely have a completely different slant. I would much prefer to see something that is very Marmite, in that, people will look at it and either go, that looks great, or that looks fucking terrible, and for it to be totally different to everything else the Imperium has access to, than for it to just look kind of similar to what we've already got. I really hope they stick to the overall way that the AdMech looks and the overall weirdness of design that they have, because it just makes them so much more distinctive, I think, than pretty much all the other factions, especially on the Imperium side of things. There is just nothing else in 40k that looks quite like the AdMech, apart from Dark Mechanicus, obviously, but we don't have those yet. So they kind of stand alone in their own unique pool of, that's cool, but what the fuck is going on? I want them to keep that. So my hope, my guess, my completely, just without any sort of information whatsoever, total random guess, is, and hope, that it will be something that has multiple legs, something long, something almost centipede-like, something that just looks really, really different to anything else the Imperium has. And if it is something like that, I'll be perfectly happy. If it's something that isn't like that and just ends up being a tracked box, I will be a little bit disappointed. Question is, what do you think it's going to look like? Do you have any idea? Do you think you could make a guess? Have you got like a best guess and a worst guess? Are you actually worried that it might look just like any other vehicle, or do you think they will embrace the mad that is AdMech and do it justice? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video, subscribe, all that shit. Click it if you like, don't click it if you don't want to, and I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.